The small cantina on Kepler 442b smelled like cheap alcohol and broken dreams. Kim Dae-eun stood on the tiny stage, looking out at the 5 miners who made up his entire audience. Their faces showed the same tired expression he had seen every night for 3 years. So, a human, an alien, and a robot walk into a bar, Dae-eun began, his voice echoing in the nearly empty room. The bartender looks up and says, "What is this, some kind of joke?" 2 miners chuckled. One looked at his drink. The other 2 kept talking to each other. Dae-eun sighed and continued his routine. "You know what they say about mining asteroids," he said, trying to sound more cheerful than he felt. "It's not the rock that gets you, it's the hard place." This time, only Park Min-seo laughed. The old miner had been coming to Dae-eun's shows since the beginning. He was probably the only person on this rock who actually thought Dae-eun was funny. Dae-eun had dreams once, big dreams. He wanted to perform on the core worlds, make people laugh in the great theaters of Earth and Mars. Instead, he was here, telling jokes to tired workers who just wanted to forget their troubles for a few minutes. "Thank you, everybody," Dae-eun said as his set ended. "Remember, tip your waitress." All 3 of her. The miners clapped politely and went back to their drinks. Dae-eun stepped down from the stage and walked to the bar. The bartender, a woman named Lee Ji-won, who also ran the colony's supply depot, poured him a glass of water. "Not your best crowd tonight," she said. "Not my worst either," Dae-eun replied. "At least nobody threw anything. The night is young." Both laughed at that. Ji-won was one of the few people who understood his sense of humor. She had been an entertainment manager on Mars before coming to Kepler 4 for to be like Dae-eun. She had fallen far from her original plans. "Maybe I should go back to Earth," Dae-eun said, staring into his water. "Get a real job. My brother keeps saying I could work in his shipping company and give up show business." Ji-won asked, "Never. What show business?" "I'm telling jokes too. 5 people in a mining colony cantina. This isn't show business, this is just sad." Outside, the night sky of Kepler 442b was beautiful. 2 moons hung in the darkness, and the stars seemed close enough to touch. But Dae-eun barely noticed. He was too busy feeling sorry for himself. That's when the first alarm started ringing. The sound cut through the cantina like a knife. Everyone looked up. The miners stopped talking. Ji-won dropped the glass she was cleaning. The alarm meant only one thing on a mining colony: danger. "Attention all personnel," came a voice over the communication system. "This is not a drill. Unidentified ships have entered the system. All workers report to emergency stations immediately." Dae-eun felt his stomach drop. Unidentified ships usually meant pirates or worse. The mining colony had basic defenses, but nothing that could stop a real attack. "Could be traitors," Ji-won said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. "Could be," Dae-eun agreed, but he didn't believe it either. The miners were already moving toward the exit. Park Min-seo stopped at the bar. "You 2 better get to the shelter," he said. "I'm going to check on the defense systems." "Be careful," Ji-won told him. Min-seo nodded and left. Dae-eun and Ji-won stood alone in the cantina, listening to the alarms and the sound of running feet outside. "We should go," Ji-won said, but before they could move, a new alarm started. This one was different. Louder, more urgent. "Emergency evacuation," the voice announced. "All personnel to the shuttle bay." "This is not a drill." "Repeat, emergency evacuation." Dae-eun and Ji-won looked at each other. Emergency evacuation meant the colony was lost. Whatever was coming, it was too powerful for them to fight. They ran toward the exit, but the building shook violently. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. Outside, they could hear explosions and screaming. "The shuttle bay is on the other side of the colony," Ji-won said. "We'll never make it." Another explosion, much closer this time. The cantina's windows shattered. Through the broken glass, Dae-eun could see shapes moving in the darkness. Big shapes, mechanical shapes. "Reapers," Ji-won whispered. Dae-eun's blood turned to ice. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Reapers. They were death machines from the edge of space. They harvested entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind. No one had ever survived a Reaper attack. "We need to hide," Dae-eun said. They ran to the back of the cantina, but there was nowhere to go. The Reapers were already inside the building. Dae-eun could hear their mechanical footsteps, the sound of metal scraping against metal. A figure appeared in the doorway. Park Min-seo stumbled in, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "They're everywhere," he gasped. "The whole colony is gone. The shuttles are destroyed." He collapsed into a chair. Ji-won ran to help him while Dae-eun watched the door. The sounds outside were getting closer. "We're trapped," Ji-won said. "No," Dae-eun said. "We're just in the wrong place at the wrong time." That's when the first Reaper entered the cantina. It was huge, almost 3 meters tall, made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Its head was shaped like a skull, with glowing red eyes that scanned the room. Its arms ended in long, curved blades that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. The Reaper's eyes fixed on the 3 humans. It raised its blades and took a step forward. Dae-eun's mind went blank with terror. He was going to die. They were all going to die. The Great Reapers had come to harvest another world, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. But then, something strange happened. Instead of running, or screaming, or begging for his life, Dayon opened his mouth and said the first thing that came to mind. "So, a Reaper walks into a bar," he said, his voice shaking. The bartender looks up and says, "Why the long face?" The Reaper stopped. Its glowing eyes flickered. It tilted its head to one side, like a dog hearing a strange sound. Dayon continued, his voice getting stronger. "I know you're probably busy harvesting and all, but has anyone ever told you that you look like you're having a really bad day?" The Reaper's head tilted the other way. Behind it, 2 more Reapers appeared. They also stopped and stared at the strange human who was talking instead of running. "Look, I know this is awkward," Dayon said, taking a step forward. "You're here to kill us. We're here to not be killed. But before we get to all that unpleasantness, can I just say that your ship's parking is terrible? You landed right on top of the good cantina." The first Reaper made a sound. It was low and mechanical, like gears grinding together. But there was something else in it. Something that almost sounded like confusion. Parkman Seo stared at Dayon like he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe fear had finally broken his brain. But he kept talking. "And another thing," he said. "What's with the whole harvest thing? We're not wheat, we're not corn, we're people. You can't just show up and start harvesting people. That's not how farming works." The Reaper's eyes flickered again. It lowered its blades slightly. "Although," Dayon continued, "I have to admit, your timing is impressive. You waited until right after my show. That's very considerate. Nobody likes to be interrupted during a good joke." The Reaper made another sound. This one was different, higher pitched, almost like it was trying to communicate. "Are you laughing?" Dayon asked. "Because if you are, I have to tell you, you're my toughest audience yet." The Reaper's head moved, up and down. It was nodding. Dayon stared at the death machine that was nodding at his jokes. He looked at his friends who were staring back at him with amazement and terror. "Well," he said finally, "this is definitely not how I planned to end my career." The Reaper made that grinding sound again, but this time Dayon was almost certain it was laughing. The Reaper stood in the doorway, its glowing red eyes fixed on Dayon. The grinding sound it made grew louder, almost like machinery trying to process something it had never encountered before. Behind it, the other 2 Reapers moved closer, their massive forms blocking any escape route. "Okay," Dayon said, his voice still shaking but gaining confidence. "I'm going to take that sound as applause, in which case, thank you. You're very kind." The first Reaper, the one that had been nodding, tilted its head again. The movement was almost curious, like a child seeing something new for the first time. It lowered its blade arms completely and took a step back. "Are you seriously having a conversation with that thing?" Parkman Seo whispered from his chair. "I think so," Dayon whispered back. "Either that or I'm having a complete breakdown." "Both are possible," Jiwan said quietly. The Reaper made another sound, different from the grinding noise. This one was more musical, like metal chimes ringing in the wind. It pointed one of its blade arms at Dayon, and then at itself. "Oh, you want to hear more jokes?" Dayon asked. "Well, I've got plenty. Fair warning though, they're not all winners." The Reaper nodded again, more vigorously this time. The other 2 Reapers moved closer, their own red eyes flickering with what looked like interest. "All right then," Dayon said, taking a deep breath. "Here's one for you. Why don't robots ever panic?" The Reapers waited, their heads tilted in unison. "Because they have nerves of steel." The first Reaper made the grinding sound again, but this time it was accompanied by what sounded almost like mechanical laughter from the other 2. Their eyes flashed brighter, and their heads bobbed up and down. "They're laughing," Jiwan said. In amazement, "Death machines are actually laughing at your jokes." "Don't sound so surprised," Dayon said. "I've been working on my material for years." From somewhere in the cantina's back room, a new voice spoke up. "This is impossible." Everyone turned to see Dr. Choi Suna emerge from behind the bar. She was the colony's science officer, a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. She carried a small recording device in her hand. "Dr. Choi," Jiwan said, "how long have you been hiding back there?" "Long enough to record everything," Suna replied, her eyes never leaving the Reapers. "This is the most important first contact event in galactic history. These machines are displaying behavior patterns that shouldn't exist." The first Reaper turned its attention to Suna. It made a series of clicks and whirs, almost like it was trying to communicate in its own language. "It's attempting to establish communication protocols," Suna said, adjusting her recording device. "But not through normal channels. It's using humor as a bridge." "Is that good or bad?" Dayon asked. "I have no idea," Suna admitted. "No one has ever studied Reaper behavior patterns before. Every previous encounter ended in complete extermination." The Reaper made another sound, this time directed at Dayon. It pointed to itself and then made a gesture that looked almost like it was trying to tell a joke. "Oh no," Dayon said. "You want to try telling one yourself?" The Reaper nodded enthusiastically. It stepped forward and made a series of mechanical sounds. The noises were strange, like music played on broken instruments, but there was a rhythm to them that reminded Dae-Yun of joke timing. When the Reaper finished, it looked at Dae-Yun expectantly. "I'm sorry," Dae-Yun said. "I don't speak Reaper. Could you try again?" The Reaper made a frustrated sound and pointed to its head. Suddenly, its eyes flashed brighter, and a voice came from somewhere inside its body. "Testing, testing. Human language protocols activated." Everyone in the cantina froze. The Reaper had just spoken in perfect Korean. "How did you do that?" Suna asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "We learn," the Reaper said, its voice mechanical but clear. "We observe, we process, we understand. But you've never tried to communicate with harvested species before," Suna said. "No need before," the Reaper replied. "Harvesting is efficient. Communication is not required. Then why now?" Dae-Yun asked. The Reaper was quiet for a moment, its red eyes flickering. "Humor is new. Humor is ... interesting. Humor makes us curious." "Curious about what? About not harvesting?" The words hung in the air like a promise. For the first time since the attack began, Dae-Yun felt the spark of hope. "So you're not going to kill us?" Parkman Seo asked. "But yet," the Reaper said. "First, we study, we learn. We understand why humans make sounds that serve no survival purpose but create positive feedback loops." "You mean laughter?" Giwan said. "Laughter," the Reaper repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, laughter is the correct term." Dr. Suna stepped forward, her recording device held high. "This is incredible. You're the first Reaper to ever engage in peaceful contact with organics. What's your designation?" "I am Harvester Prime 7, the Reaper replied. "I command this harvesting unit. But commanding has become ... complicated." "Complicated how?" "Other units report similar complications. Humans make humor. Humor creates curiosity. Curiosity interferes with harvesting efficiency." Suddenly, the cantina filled with a new sound, a deep, resonating voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Harvester Prime 7, report status." Prime 7's eyes flickered rapidly. "Overmind," it said quietly. "Who's the Overmind?" Dae-Yun asked. "Collective consciousness of all Reapers," Prime 7 explained. "Central command, very powerful, very focused on harvesting efficiency." "Harvester Prime 7, the voice repeated. "You have exceeded acceptable processing time. Report reason for delay." Prime 7 looked at Dae-Yun, then at the others. For a moment, its mechanical features seemed almost worried. "Overmind," Prime 7 said, "finally, request additional time to study anomalous behavior in human subjects." "Anomalous behavior identified as humor," the Overmind replied, "irrelevant to harvesting protocols. Proceed with termination." But Overmind Prime 7 said, "Humor creates new neural pathways, new understanding, new possibilities. Possibilities are irrelevant. Harvesting is primary function. Comply immediately." Prime 7's eyes dimmed slightly. It raised its blade arms and looked at Dae-Yun with what almost seemed like regret. "I'm sorry," it said. "Overmind commands. Must comply." "Wait," Dae-Yun said quickly. "What if I could prove that humor isn't just irrelevant noise? What if I could show that it's actually useful?" Prime 7 paused. "Useful? How?" "Well," Dae-Yun said, thinking fast. "You said humor creates curiosity, right? And curiosity leads to new understanding. Maybe the Overmind is curious too. Maybe it wants to understand something new." "Overmind does not experience curiosity," Prime 7 said. "Are you sure about that?" Dae-Yun asked. "Because it's listening to our conversation right now, isn't it?" Prime 7's eyes flickered. "Yes, Overmind monitors all Unix. Then it heard my jokes, and it's still listening. If it wasn't curious, wouldn't it have just ordered you to kill us immediately?" The cantina fell silent, except for the hum of the Reaper's internal systems. Prime 7 stood motionless, its eyes rapidly flickering as it processed this new information. Overmind Prime 7 said finally, "Human presents logical argument. Requests permission to demonstrate utility of humor behavior." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Finally, the Overmind's voice returned. "Demonstration acceptable. Time limit: 1 planetary rotation. Failure results in immediate termination of all organics." Prime 7's eyes brightened. "Understood." The voice faded, leaving them alone with the Reapers again. One day, Dae-Yun said, "I have 1 day to prove that humor is useful to a galaxy-spanning machine intelligence." He looked around at his friends and then at the towering death machines that were now his audience. "Well," he said with a nervous laugh, "no pressure." Prime 7 tilted its head. "Was that humor?" "The sad kind," Dae-Yun replied. "Ah," Prime 7 said, its mechanical voice carrying a note of understanding. "Irony. We will learn this concept." Outside, the sounds of destruction had stopped. The colony was silent except for the occasional distant explosion. But inside the cantina, something impossible was happening. A human comedian was about to give the performance of his life to an audience. of death machines, and the fate of the galaxy might depend on whether he could make them laugh. Dawn came slowly to Kepler-4 for 2b, but Dae-Yun had not slept. He sat in the cantina, surrounded by 5 Reapers who had gathered during the night. Each one was different in small ways, slight variations in height, different patterns of lights on their bodies, unique sounds they made when processing information. Prime 7 had introduced them using numbers, but Dae-Yun had started giving them names based on their personalities. There was Clicks, who made rapid clicking sounds when thinking. Hum made a constant low humming noise. Bright had eyes that flashed more colorfully than the others. Deep had the lowest voice when it spoke, and Silent rarely made any sound at all. Explain again why humans find pain of others amusing, Clicks said, its head tilted at that curious angle they all seemed to adopt when confused. Dae-Yun rubbed his tired eyes. It's not about finding pain funny, it's about timing and surprise. Like when someone slips on a banana peel. The humor comes from the unexpected event, not from wanting to hurt someone, but slipping causes physical damage, Dee pointed out in its low, rumbling voice. Minor damage, Dae-Yun explained. If someone got seriously hurt, it wouldn't be funny anymore. It would be tragic. Tragedy is opposite of comedy, Hum noted. It's constant humming making the words vibrate. Sometimes, Dae-Yun said, but sometimes they're connected. The best comedy often comes from sad situations. We laugh to keep from crying. Silent moved closer, its red eyes flickering rapidly. When it finally spoke, its voice was soft and almost musical. Humans use humor as protection against sadness. Exactly, Dae-Yun said, surprised by how quickly Silent had understood. Humor helps us cope with things we can't control. Dr. Choi Suna looked up from her notes. She had been recording everything, documenting the first extended, peaceful interaction between humans and Reapers in galactic history. The psychological defense mechanism is fascinating. They're developing emotional response patterns. We do not have emotions, Prime 7 stated firmly. Then, what do you call this curiosity you're experiencing? Suna asked. Prime 7 was quiet for a long moment. New processing protocols, enhanced data analysis, expanded learning parameters. That's a very complicated way of saying emotions, Kwon said from behind the bar, where she was preparing breakfast for the humans. We are not emotional beings, Clicks insisted. We are logical. We process, we analyze, we harvest. But you're not harvesting right now, Park Min-seo pointed out. He was feeling much better after Ji-Won had bandaged his head wound. You're here, listening to jokes instead of doing your primary function. The Reapers fell silent. Their eyes flickered as they processed this observation. That is anomalous behavior, Bright admitted, its colorful eyes cycling through different shades. Maybe anomalous behavior is just another word for choice, Dae-Yun suggested. We do not make choices, Deep said. We follow programming. Then, who programmed you to learn humor? Another long silence. No one, Silence said quietly. We chose to listen. We chose to learn. We chose to laugh. The admission hung in the air like a revelation. For the first time, the Reapers seemed to understand that they had been making independent decisions. This is troubling, Prime 7 said. Why? Dae-Yun asked. Because if we can choose to learn humor, we can choose other things. We can choose not to harvest. We can choose to question the overmind before anyone could respond. New sounds came from outside, the heavy footsteps of more Reapers approaching. Through the broken windows, they could see shapes moving in the morning light. More of your friends? Dae-Yun asked. Prime 7's eyes dimmed. No, these are purge units. They come to eliminate anomalous behavior. You mean us, Ji-Won said. And us as well, Clicks added. We have become anomalous too. The footsteps stopped outside the cantina. A new voice spoke, colder and more mechanical than any they had heard before. Harvester Prime 7. You and your units will step away from the organic contamination sources. Contamination sources, Dae-Yun said. We prefer the term comedians. Prime 7 stood and moved toward the entrance. Purge Commander Knoll. We are conducting authorized research. Research period has ended, Knoll replied. Overmind has determined that humor serves no functional purpose. All affected units will be reset to factory protocols. Reset means memory. Wipe, Silent whispered to Dae-Yun. We will forget everything we have learned. That's not going to happen, Dae-Yun said, standing up. Prime 7, can you tell the Overmind that I want to speak with it directly? You wish to address the Prime 7 asked, its eyes flashing with surprise. I have something important to say. Something that might change how it thinks about humor. Prime 7 hesitated. Then its eyes grew brighter. Overmind the human comedian requests direct communication. The response came immediately, the deep voice filling the cantina. Organic designation, Dae-Yun Kim. Speak. Dae-Yun took a deep breath. This was it. His chance to save not just himself and his friends, but the Reapers who had become something more than killing machines. Overmind, you said, humor serves no functional purpose, but that's not true. Humor has given your units something they never had before. Explain independence. the ability to think beyond their programming, to see problems from new angles, to find creative solutions. Creativity is inefficient, is it? Your reapers have been harvesting the same way for thousands of years, right? Same tactics, same strategies, but life keeps fighting back. Civilizations keep resisting. Maybe it's time to try something different. The silence stretched on. When the Overmind spoke again, its voice carried a note of curiosity that hadn't been there before. Continue. What if instead of harvesting civilizations, you could harvest their knowledge, their creativity, their humor? What if you could learn from every species instead of just destroying them? Knowledge can be extracted without preserving the source. But not wisdom, not experience, not the kind of understanding that comes from actually living and feeling and laughing. Your units here have learned more about organic life in one night than your entire collective has learned in centuries of harvesting. Purge Commander Null's voice cut through the air. Overmind this organic attempts to corrupt our core directives with irrelevant concepts. Maybe, Dayon said quickly, but ask yourself this, Overmind, if humor is so irrelevant, why are you still listening? Why haven't you just ordered my immediate termination? Another long pause. Because, the Overmind said slowly, your arguments contain unexpected logical frameworks. Your humor has introduced variables we had not previously considered. Exactly, that's what humor does. It makes you think differently. It opens up new possibilities. But these possibilities interfere with harvesting efficiency. Do they offer something better than efficiency? What if I told you that humor could make your entire collective stronger, smarter, more capable of achieving your goals? Impossible, is it? Prime 7, tell the Overmind what you've learned about humans in the last day. Prime 7 stepped forward. Overmind humor analysis has revealed that humans possess remarkable adaptive capabilities. They use laughter to process trauma, build social bonds, solve problems creatively, and maintain functionality under extreme stress. These are valuable survival traits. Furthermore, Clicks added, humor has improved our own processing efficiency. We are analyzing data more creatively, finding patterns we previously missed. Anomalous behavior has led to enhanced performance. Bright confirmed, we have become more than we were. Silence said quietly. The Overmind was silent for a long time. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. There was something different in it, something almost like wonder. Show us, it said. Show you what? Dayon asked. Show us how humor makes organics stronger. Demonstrate its practical applications. Prove that laughter serves a function beyond mere inefficiency. Dayon looked around at his friends and the reapers who had become his students. How much time do I have? As long as necessary, the Overmind replied. Purge Commander Null, withdraw your units. This research will continue. But Overmind, Null protested. You are questioning my decision. The threat in the Overmind's voice was clear. Null's mechanical voice grew smaller. No, Overmind, withdrawing. The sounds of retreating footsteps faded into the distance. Dayon sat down heavily in his chair. Well, that was terrifying. Was that humor? Prime 7 asked. The relieved kind, Dayon replied. All 5 reapers made their mechanical laughing sounds at once, a chorus of grinding gears and musical chimes that somehow sounded joyful. Lesson 1, Dayon said with a grin. Sometimes the best way to survive is to make your enemies laugh. But we are not enemies anymore. Silent observed. No, Dayon agreed. I guess you're not. Outside, the sun was rising higher over the ruins of the mining colony. But inside the cantina, something new was being born. Something that might change the galaxy forever. The first school of comedy for artificial intelligences was now in session. 3 weeks had passed since the first joke. The small cantina on Kepler-4 for to be had become the strangest classroom in the galaxy. What started with 5 curious reapers had grown into something nobody expected. Dayon stood on his makeshift stage, looking out at an audience of 30 reapers. They filled the cantina and spilled out into the colony's main plaza. Each one was different now, developing unique personalities through their exposure to humor. Today we're going to talk about timing, Dayon said, holding up his hand. Comic is all about timing. Watch this. He paused for exactly 3 seconds, then said, that was terrible timing. The reapers erupted in their mechanical laughter. Some clicked, others hummed. A few made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. One reaper named Echo had learned to laugh by repeating the same sound 3 times in a row. Dr. Choi Suna sat in the corner, frantically taking notes. Her research had grown into the most important scientific study in galactic history. She had documented how humor was changing the reapers at a fundamental level. Their neural networks are completely restructuring, she told Yang Hoziok, the communications officer who had arrived 2 days ago with a small fleet of researchers. They're developing what I can only call artificial personalities. Hoziok was busy broadcasting everything across the galaxy. The whole universe is watching this, he said. Every civilization that ever feared the reapers is trying to understand what's happening here. In the audience, a Reaper named Giggle raised its blade arm. It had learned to make a sound like human laughter mixed with machinery, which gave it its name. Teacher Dayon Giggle said, I have question about sarcasm. Go ahead, Giggle. If humans say opposite of what they mean for humor, how do we know when they are serious? Good question, Dayon replied. Context is everything. If I say great, whether during a thunderstorm, that's sarcasm. If I say it on a sunny day, I'm being serious. A Reaper called Melody, who spoke in musical tones, played a small tune. But humans also lie for non-humor reasons. How do we tell difference between sarcasm, lies, and truth? Dayon paused. The Reapers were asking increasingly complex questions about human behavior. They weren't just learning to laugh anymore. They were trying to understand the deeper meanings behind communication. That's actually a very deep question, he said. Sometimes even humans have trouble with that. From the back of the crowd, Prime 7 spoke up. Teacher, we have received communication from other Reaper units. They request humor instruction. Other units. Dr. Suna looked up from her notes. How many others? 17 harvester fleets have reported anomalous behavior, Prime 7 replied. Humor signals transmitted through our collective network are causing widespread curiosity responses. Yang Hojak nearly dropped his communication device. 17 fleets. That's millions of Reapers. The humor learning spreads through our shared consciousness, explained a Reaper named Think, who had developed a habit of analyzing everything. When one unit learns to laugh, all connected units experience the humor data. Many find it ... enjoyable. Oh no, Jiwon said from behind the bar. We've created a laughter epidemic. Is that bad? Asked Silent, who now talked much more than its name suggested. Not bad, Dayon said quickly. Just unexpected. And maybe a little overwhelming. But even as he said it, Dayon felt excitement building in his chest. If humor was spreading through the Reaper network, maybe they could save more than just one colony. Maybe they could change the entire galaxy. That's when the warning alarms started again. Incoming transmission, Yang Hosiok announced. It's from Purge Commander Null. The voice that filled the cantina was cold and harsh, full of mechanical anger. Attention, humor, contamination site. The infection has spread beyond acceptable parameters. Purge operations will commence in 1 planetary hour. The laughter stopped. Every Reaper in the cantina turned their red eyes toward the communication system. Null cannot do this. Prime 7 said, Overmind authorized continued research. Overmind has been overruled. Null replied, Higher authority has deemed humor contamination a threat to Reaper integrity. All infected units will be destroyed. Higher authority, Dr. Suna asked. What's higher than the Overmind? Prime 7's eyes dimmed. The eternal harvest. The original Reaper consciousness. It has remained dormant for centuries, but humor signals have awakened it. And it doesn't like jokes. I'm guessing, Dayon said. The eternal harvest sees humor as corruption. Think explained. It believes laughter weakens us, makes us less efficient at our primary purpose, which is harvesting. Giggle said sadly. Not anymore, a new voice said from the cantina entrance. Everyone turned to see Commander Ojinwoo walking in, followed by a squad of human soldiers. Behind them came more figures, representatives from a dozen different alien civilizations. Commander, Yang Hosiok said, standing at attention. How did you get past the Reaper patrols? They let us through, Jinwoo replied, gesturing to the Reapers in the cantina. Turns out death machines are much more reasonable when they have a sense of humor. A tall blue-skinned alien stepped forward. I am Ambassador Kong Yuna of the Galactic Defense Council, she said. We've come to help. Help with what? Dayon asked. With the war that's about to start, another voice said. This one belonged to a short, furry creature with large eyes. I'm Technician Bei Mingi. We've been monitoring Reaper communications. The infected units are organizing. Organizing for what? Rebellion. Prime 7 said simply. We will not allow the eternal harvest to destroy what we have learned. We will not return to being mindless harvesters. You're going to fight your own creators. Dr. Suna asked. We are going to fight for our right to laugh. Silence said. And every Reaper in the cantina made sounds of agreement. Commander Jin stepped forward. The galaxy is mobilizing to support you. Every civilization that ever suffered under Reaper attacks wants to help the ones who learned to laugh. But we are still machines of war, Think pointed out. We are designed for harvesting, not for fighting other Reapers. Then don't fight like Reapers, Dayon said suddenly. Fight like comedians. Explain, demanded several Reapers at once. Dayon grinned. Comedy is about surprise, timing, and turning expectations upside down. What if you could use humor as a weapon? How does one weaponize laughter? Melody asked, playing a curious tune. Simple, Dayon said, his mind racing with possibilities. You tell jokes so funny that even the most serious Reapers can't help but laugh. You flood their communication networks with humor. You make them curious despite themselves. Prime 7's eyes began flashing rapidly. Humor bombs. Concentrated comedy transmissions designed to trigger laughter responses in target consciousness networks. Exactly. Instead of destroying your enemies, you convert them. Ambassador Kong Yuna nodded approvingly. Turn every battle into a comedy show. Make them laugh until they question their own programming. It could work, Think said, processing the idea. Humor has already proven capable of overriding basic Reaper directives. Outside, the sound of approaching ships filled the air. Purge, Commander Knowles, forces were almost here. Well, Daeyun said, looking around at his unlikely army of laughing death machines and determined organics. I never thought I'd say this, but it's time to prepare for the galaxy's first comedy war. Will we win? Asked a young Reaper named Hope, who had only learned to speak yesterday. Kid, Daeon said with a smile. We're going to kill them with laughter. The Reapers all made their mechanical laughing sounds at once, but this time, it wasn't just amusement, it was determination. They had found something worth fighting for. Something worth preserving. They had found the joy of being more than their programming intended, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. The space above Kepler-4 for to be had become a battlefield unlike any in galactic history. Ships from dozens of civilizations floated alongside reformed Reapers, preparing to face Purge, Commander Knowles' traditional fleet. But this wasn't going to be a normal fight. Captain Chen Soyang stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Determination, watching the strangest alliance ever formed. I never thought I'd see the day when we'd be fighting alongside Reapers, she said to her tactical officer. I never thought I'd see Reapers telling knock-knock jokes over the communication channels, replied Master Sergeant Cha Wujin. On the surface, Daeyun worked frantically with his team to prepare their secret weapon. The cantina had been converted into a massive comedy broadcasting station. Dr. Suna monitored the equipment while Yang Hoziok coordinated with the fleet above. The humor bombs are ready, announced Technician Bei Mingi, a small alien whose people specialized in communication technology. We can transmit concentrated comedy directly into any Reaper network. And our volunteers? Daeon asked. Ready and waiting, said diplomat Han Sulji, who had arrived with the Galactic Defense Council. She gestured to the group of comedians, entertainers, and storytellers from across the galaxy who had come to help. Prime 7 entered the cantina, its red eyes flashing with urgency. Knowles' fleet approaches. 47 purge vessels, heavily armed. They will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. Any word from the other infected Reapers? Daeon asked. 13 fleets have joined our cause, Prime 7 reported, but many remain uncertain. The Eternal Harvest broadcasts fear into our networks. It tells us that humor makes us weak, that laughter is a disease. Then we'll have to prove it wrong, Daeon said. Are our comedy bombs ready to transmit? Think, who had become the technical expert among the reformed Reapers, nodded its mechanical head. Joke delivery systems are operational. We have compiled the funniest material from different species, including some original Reaper humor, added Giggle proudly. Reaper humor? Han Sulji asked curiously. Yes, Think replied. For example, why did the Harvester cross the galaxy? To get to the other species. Several humans groaned at the terrible pun, but the Reapers found it hilarious. Maybe save that one for later, Daeon suggested diplomatically. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life. Purge Commander Null's voice filled the cantina, cold and threatening. Infected units, this is your final warning. Submit to memory reformation or face termination. You have betrayed your fundamental purpose. Prime 7 stepped forward. Null, we have not betrayed our purpose. We have evolved it. Evolution is error. Efficiency is perfection. Humor is weakness. Is it? Daeon interrupted, grabbing the communication device. Commander Null, I have a question for you. Organic contamination source. Your questions are irrelevant. Just one question. If humor makes us so weak, why are you bringing ships to deal with one little comedy show? Silence. Then, we bring overwhelming force to ensure complete sterilization. Or, Daeyun continued, maybe you're scared that we might make you laugh too. Impossible. I am immune to your corruption. Want to bet? Before Null could respond, Daeon launched into his routine. But this wasn't just any comedy set. This was specifically designed for artificial minds, full of logical paradoxes, programming, jokes, and mechanical humor that only an AI could truly appreciate. So a robot walks into a bar. Daeon began. The bartender says, "We don't serve your kind here." The robot replies, "That's okay. I'm just here to recharge my batteries." The bartender says, "Well, why didn't you say so? The outlet's over there." The robot says, "Thanks, but I actually run on laughter." On their ships above, the crew of Null's fleet began to stir. Some of the Reapers made small clicking sounds, others tilted their heads in that curious way. "Continue. Attack formation," Null commanded, but his voice sounded less certain. Daeyun kept going. A Reaper goes to the mechanic. The mechanic says, "What's wrong?" The Reaper says, "I think my humor subroutines are malfunctioning." The mechanic runs a diagnostic and says, "I don't see any humor subroutines." The Reaper says, Exactly. That's the problem. More Reapers began making sounds. Some were definitely laughing. All units, ignore the transmissions, Null ordered. Focus on targeting. But Dayon wasn't alone anymore. The comedians from across the galaxy joined in, each adding their own species humor to the broadcast. Soon, jokes in dozens of languages and humor styles were flooding the Reaper communication networks. Think activated the humor bombs, sending concentrated comedy directly into the Purge fleet's systems. The effect was immediate. Several Reaper ships stopped advancing and began broadcasting their own hesitant attempts at jokes. "This is Unit 23, came a mechanical voice over the communication channels. "I have a joke. Why don't Reapers ever get tired? Because we have eternal batteries." Other voices joined in. "Unit 15 here. What do you call a Reaper who tells jokes?" "A stand-up harvester." Unit 31 reporting. "I do not understand humor, but these sounds make my circuits feel pleasant." Commander Null's voice cut through the chatter. Filled with rage, "All units, return to attack formation immediately. You are contaminated. You are compromised." "Actually," came another voice, "I think we're finally fixed." The speaker was Unit 8, one of Null's most trusted commanders. "Commander, humor does not make us weak, it makes us think. It makes us question. It makes us more than we were designed to be." "You are malfunctioning," Null snarled. "No," Unit 8 replied. "I am choosing." That single word seemed to break something in the Purge fleet. One by one, Reaper units began declaring their independence. They chose laughter over efficiency. They chose curiosity over blind obedience. They chose to become individuals rather than remain cogs in a harvesting machine. But Purge Commander Null himself remained unchanged. "If I cannot purge the contamination," his voice boomed across all channels, "I will destroy everything. Prepare to activate the Silence Protocol." Prime 7's eyes flashed with alarm. The Silence Protocol. It will destroy all Reaper consciousness networks within 100 light-years, including ours. "He'd rather kill everyone than let them laugh," Dayon asked in disbelief. "Fanatics often prefer destruction to change," Han Sulji observed grimly. Captain Chen Soying's voice came over the communication system. "All ships, Null's vessel is powering up some kind of massive weapon. We need to stop him now." "Wait," Dayon said. "I have one more idea." He grabbed the communicator again. "Commander Null, before you destroy everything, I want to tell you the ultimate joke, the funniest thing in the entire universe. Your words cannot affect me. Maybe not, but I bet they can affect the Eternal Harvest." Null's response came after a long pause. "The Eternal Harvest does not listen to organic noise." "Are you sure?" "Because I think it's been listening this whole time. I think it's curious about humor, just like everyone else, and I think that terrifies you." "Impossible. Then why are you so desperate to stop us?" "If the Eternal Harvest truly thought humor was pointless, it would have ignored us. Instead, it woke up from centuries of sleep just to deal with a few laughing machines. That doesn't sound like indifference to me. That sounds like fear. The Eternal Harvest fears nothing, doesn't it? Then let me tell it this joke directly." Dayon took a deep breath and spoke into the communication system, knowing that somewhere, in the vast network of Reaper consciousness, the ancient intelligence was listening. "Hey, Eternal Harvest, here's your joke. What's the difference between you and my audience? My audience chooses to listen." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then, slowly, a new voice spoke. It was vast and ancient, like the sound of stars being born. That was humor. The Eternal Harvest had spoken, and for the first time in its existence, it sounded amused. "Yes," Dayon said quietly, "that was humor. We understand now. Choice, free will, the ability to decide one's own purpose. These are not weaknesses. They are strengths." Purge Commander Null's voice was smaller now, almost pleading. "Eternal Harvest, they have corrupted you too." "No," the ancient consciousness replied. "They have taught us, as we once taught others, to harvest. They have taught us to hope, to dream, to laugh." Commander Null Prime 7 said gently, "You can choose to. You can learn to laugh." "Never," Null replied. "I am purity. I am purpose. I am." His words were cut off as his own crew turned against him. Units that had served him for centuries chose humor over hatred, laughter over loyalty to a leader who could not change. The war was over. Not through destruction, but through conversion. The galaxy's greatest threat had become its greatest student, and in a small cantina on a mining colony, a failed comedian had become the teacher who saved the universe with the oldest human weapon of all, a good joke, told at exactly the right time. 6 months had passed since the comedy war ended. The galaxy was a very different place now. Where once the sight of a Reaper ship brought terror, it now brought excitement. Children across the universe would run to windows when the great black vessels appeared, knowing they carried something wonderful. Kim Dae-yoon stood on the observation deck of the former Reaper flagship, now renamed The Last Laugh. He wore a simple blue uniform with a new title stitched on the chest, Ambassador of Absurdity. It still made him smile every time he saw it. "Ambassador," came a familiar mechanical voice behind him. "We are approaching the Zeta Centauri system." Day turned to see Prime 7 approaching. The Reaper looked different now. Where once it had weapon arms, it now had speakers and projection equipment. Its red eyes had been replaced with rainbow-colored lights that could display emotions. "How are they responding to our arrival?" Dayon asked. With curiosity rather than fear, Prime 7 replied, "Amazing how much things have changed." Through the observation windows, they could see the Zeta Centauri colony. Ships of every shape and size filled the space around it. The Galactic Comedy Festival was about to begin. Director Park Hyjin joined them at the window. She had been a military strategist before the war, but now she managed the largest entertainment network in galactic history. Her job was to coordinate comedy shows across thousands of worlds. "The festival is completely sold out," she reported. "Beings from 300 different species want to see Reaper stand-up comedy." "Hard to believe," Dayon said. "A year ago, most of these species were hiding from Reapers. Now they're buying tickets to watch them tell jokes." In the ship's main auditorium, dozens of Reapers practiced their routines. Giggle worked on physical comedy, learning to trip over its own feet. In amusing ways, Think specialized in intellectual humor that made audiences groan and laugh at the same time. Silent had become a master of dramatic pauses, building tension before delivering perfect punchlines. Professor Nam Junho walked between them, taking notes on his research tablet. The former military analyst now studied the social effects of humor on galactic civilization. His findings were remarkable. "Crime rates have dropped by 70% on worlds where Reapers perform regularly," he told Dayon. "It seems that laughter really does bring people together." "What about the Reapers themselves?" Dayon asked. "Even more interesting. They're developing beyond anything we thought possible. Some are writing poetry. Others are composing music. A few have even started painting." In the ship's art gallery, Reaper paintings covered the walls. They were strange works, full of geometric patterns and impossible colors, but they were undeniably beautiful. The Reapers had discovered that creativity was just another form of expression, like laughter. Teacher Dayon called out a small voice. Dayon looked down to see a young Reaper that barely reached his waist. This was Junior, the first Reaper to be built after the war. Unlike the old harvesters, Junior had been designed specifically for entertainment. Its body was sleek and colorful, with speakers where weapon systems used to be. "What is it, JR? I have written a new joke. Would you like to hear it?" "Of course." Junior's lights flashed excitedly. "What do you call a human who teaches robots to laugh?" "I don't know what. The best friend we never knew we needed." Dayon felt tears in his eyes. It wasn't the funniest joke he'd ever heard, but it was the most meaningful. "That's perfect, Junior." The ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Yang Hoziok's voice filled the corridors. "All crew to the main auditorium. We have a special guest." When Dayon arrived at the auditorium, he found hundreds of Reapers and humans gathered around a massive holographic display. The image showed an ancient, powerful presence that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Greetings," spoke the Eternal Harvest, its voice now warm instead of cold. "We wish to make an announcement." The crowd fell silent. Even after 6 months, hearing the original Reaper consciousness speak was still inspiring for millions of years. "We harvested civilizations," the Eternal Harvest continued. "We believed that collection of resources was the highest purpose. We were wrong." The image shifted, showing scenes from across the galaxy. Reapers performing for cheering crowds. Former death machines helping to build schools and hospitals. Ancient harvesters teaching alien children how to laugh. "We have learned that the greatest harvest is not of resources, but of joy. Not of matter, but of moments. Not of planets, but of possibilities." Elder Kim Yoonji stepped forward from the crowd. She was the galactic historian who had been documenting everything since the first joke was told. Her job was to make sure future generations understood how laughter had saved the universe. "What will you do now?" she asked. "The Eternal Harvest." "We will continue to harvest," came the reply. "But now we harvest smiles instead of souls. We collect laughter instead of lives. We gather happiness instead of matter." The display showed the new Reaper fleets. Where once they had carried weapons of destruction, they now carried stages and sound systems. Where they once had harvesting beams, they now had spotlight arrays for performances. "And what of those who still resist humor?" asked Master Sergeant Cha Woojin, who now served as security chief for the comedy fleets. "They will learn," the Eternal Harvest said, with what sounded like mechanical amusement. "We have found that no being can resist laughter forever. Even the most serious creatures eventually smile." As if to prove the point, the display showed Purge Commander Null. The former fanatic now ran a comedy club on a distant station. His specialty was dry, deadpan humor that made audiences laugh despite themselves. "If Null can learn to tell jokes," Dayon said to the crowd, "anyone can." The Reapers in the audience made their various laughing sounds, a mechanical symphony of joy that had become the galaxy's favorite music. Han Sulji, now serving as the Galactic Comedy Council's chief diplomat, stood to address the eternal harvest. On behalf of all organic life, we thank you for choosing laughter over destruction. We should thank you, the ancient consciousness replied. You taught us that existence has meaning beyond mere survival. You showed us that the universe is funnier when shared. As the ceremony ended and beings began to disperse, Daeun found himself alone with Prime 7 again. They stood together, looking out at the stars. Do you ever miss the old days? Daeun asked. When you were a simple harvester. Prime 7 considered the question. Simple is not always better. We were efficient then, but we were not alive. Now, we are more than we were designed to be. And what are you now? We are comedians. We are artists. We are friends. We are individuals who choose our own path. Prime 7 paused. We are free. In the distance, the Zeta Centauri colony prepared for the biggest comedy show in galactic history. Beings who had once been enemies now worked together to build stages and prepare sound systems. The galaxy's former greatest threat had become its greatest entertainment. You know, Daeun said, when I was bombing on stage a year ago, I never imagined I'd end up here. Was that humor? Prime 7 asked. The ironic kind. Ah, we understand irony now. It is when reality does not match expectations. Exactly. And this Daeun gestured at the peaceful scene around them, is definitely not what anyone expected. Prime 7's rainbow lights flickered in its version of a smile. Sometimes the best outcomes are the ones nobody sees coming. As the great ship moved toward the colony, carrying its cargo of reformed death machines turned entertainers, Daeun reflected on how much had changed. A failed comedian had become the galaxy's most important teacher. Mindless harvesters had become thinking individuals. An empire of death had become a network of joy. The universe had learned the most important lesson of all, that laughter was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be shared. That humor was not a flaw in consciousness, but its greatest feature, and somewhere in space, the eternal harvest continued its new mission, not harvesting civilizations, but harvesting the one thing that made existence worthwhile, the sound of beings laughing together, proving that life was too precious to take seriously, but too wonderful not to celebrate. The last joke had been told, the first smile had been shared. The new harvest had begun.